Hello, hi Tony, thanks for having me. My name is Sarah Monzon and I am going to be reading an excerpt from the first chapter of one of my books from my backlist called the Esther Paradigm. This is a contemporary romance that is loosely based off the story of Esther. Okay, this starts in chapter 1. This was not how I thought I would die. Not that I sat around imagining my death. I'm not that morbid. But never in my wildest dreams had I imagined this. Along the horizon, racing toward me with frightening speed, a billowing brown wall licked the earth's surface and spit it out again, a ferocious scream that caused my heart to stutter in my chest. 6 years away, and this was how my beloved desert welcomed me home. Wind whipped my long, loose dress around my legs and tugged at the few strands of hair not safely tucked in a ponytail under my hijab. I'd always been thankful the Bedouin clan my parents ministered to as missionaries didn't adhere to the more concealing Muslim headwear, such as a niqab or burqa. I had to admit, though, that having more material to cover my nose and mouth would be helpful against the dust storm about to consume me. With quick motions, I reached around my head and unwrapped the bottom of my hijab, rewrapping it around my nose and mouth. A bit of water or petroleum jelly would work even better to save my nose and lungs from the dry desert sand, but some protection was better than none. Tiny grains of sand picked up by the wind pelted my body like fastballs pitched by Major League Baseball players. I hunched over, lowering my frame as close to the ground as I could. Never knew if the wind had picked up more than just the earth's surface. An abandoned tire rim or something else could decapitate a person when chucked at top speeds. It would be just like that temperamental mistress to hurl an object absently left on the wayside. The storm was on me now. My lungs constricted to rid themselves of the tiny particles I'd breathed in, coughing hot breath into the material around my mouth. My eyes watered with the force of the wind, and I blinked rapidly to try and rid the granules scratching my irises. Lifting my backpack, I shielded my face and eyes, wishing I hadn't let the driver drop me off so far from where the clan currently had their tents pitched. The inside of a 20-year-old Jeep would have served as a wonderful bunker against this onslaught. Now, I had no protection. In the thick of it, I squinted through the brown haze, looking for something to hunker under on the leeward side. The rise of a nearby dune lied of its ability to protect. Fortunately, I understood the reality of the phrase shifting sands, had no desire to change my death sentence to asphyxiation due to sand in my lungs, to being buried alive when the wind deposited the dune right on top of my head. A camel's bray rent through the cacophony of the storm. My heart restarted. If ever there was an animal built to survive the temper of the desert, it was the camel. I pushed my legs forward, wishing I wore pants rather than my dress, which wrapped itself around my calves and threatened to topple me. If I could hear the camel's call, perhaps its owner could hear mine. I lifted my chin and took in a lungful of air before pulling down the covering from my lips. Musaada, I yelled for help in Arabic. Musaada. The camel answered, and I took a few more stumbling steps toward the sound. The sand made it difficult to do anything. Walk, see, breathe. If I didn't find a place to wait out the storm soon, I wouldn't survive it. A man appeared as if a mirage, the kind that might strike fear into some of the hearts of my fellow Americans after the horrifying terrorist attacks. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Islamic Jihad, Taliban. While a few extremists built hatred throughout the world, my heart harbored no such feelings. These people were my brothers and sisters, the family among which I'd been raised. No traditional greeting of Assalamu alaikum passed the man's lips, covered by the same scarf that wrapped his head in a turban. Only his dark, piercing eyes showed through the small opening of material. He studied me a moment, a question in his gaze, as if trying to place me from his memory, or wondering about the crazy woman with impossibly light skin who'd found herself in the middle of a death storm in a barely inhabited desert. With blue eyes, blonde hair, and a fair complexion that the sun loved to torture, I'd long since become accustomed to such looks from those whose mere appearance made them better suited for this climate. I was an anomaly, but one who'd rather stay alive, so when the man pushed my head down and dragged me forward by the arm, I followed willingly. The camel's bray sounded louder, and soon we slumped along its side, allowing its body to shield us from the spitting wind and sand. The sheer force of the wind made it impossible to talk, so I forewent a thank you and bent over at the waist, tucking my chin to my chest and allowing my body to lean heavily against the scratchy brown hair of the big animal next to me. The man stroked his camel's side, talking low and making reassuring noises. Growing up among the Bedouin people, I realized the importance of livestock, camels especially. They were currency, transportation, sustenance, and overall survival. I'd never truly grown fond of the stubborn beasts, their milk too sharp and salty on my tongue. I'd missed the pasteurized cow's milk bought by the gallon at the local supermarket. Their gait too choppy. I'd missed the pony rides at the petting zoo. Their hair too coarse. I'd missed the soft cotton sundresses that twirled around me as I spun in a field of wildflowers. But surprising enough, I discovered over the past 6 years when I've been stateside to finish high school and then attend college that while I never liked camels, I had come to respect them and maybe even miss them to a degree. Now the tally chart in the animal's favor grew since the mammal currently shielded me from sudden death. As quick as the storm had raced in, it vanished. Like a sprinter who collapsed after passing the finish line, the winds died, dropping the sand back to the ground. The man patted his camel's side with 2 hearty thwacks and then stood and pulled a rope connected to the animal's halter, bringing its big head around. He inspected its nose and eyes, murmuring low as he did so and pulling the scarf down from around his face. Not as graceful as the camel, I unfolded my legs beneath me and arranged the bottom portions of my dress before awkwardly standing. I tilted my head in his direction, lowering my gaze to my feet. It was out of respect to his culture and religion that I did so. I didn't want my actions, or lack thereof, to build a barrier between a friendship with anyone. Although I didn't have ulterior motives besides Christian love, in a country where proselytizing remained illegal, the only means of sharing Christ lay in friendship evangelism. Despite my respectful humility, I had to speak my deepest heartfelt thanks, as I knew that he had saved my life. Shukran. His feet moved toward me. I held perfectly still, eyes downcast and hands clasped together in front of me. When his thumb and forefinger lightly pinched my chin, I sucked in a breath, stunned. Interaction between genders was severely limited, physical contact reserved for the privacy of the marriage tent. Upward pressure raised my face. I found his black eyes in a fixed stare, probing, searching my own. One side of his mouth lifted, and the hardness that had creased his forehead eased away as amusement flashed across his features. His hand dropped as the other side of his mouth lifted to join the first. His full lips, framed by a dark, short-trimmed beard, formed a wide smile. He shook his head. Based on his actions, I should know him. But who was he? I guess you'll have to get the book and finish reading to find out. Thanks for having me.